A 21-year-old rapper was found lying in the street on the 4300 block of Parrish Street. Several gunshot wounds, a late-night police response, a hospital run to Penn Presbyterian. Then years later, his name would become part of one of Philadelphia's biggest drill indictments, a case prosecutors say involved 5 homicides, 35 shooting victims, and a violent timeline that stretched across multiple neighborhoods. His name was Tahjae Brooks, but in the Philly music scene, people knew him as Jae100. To some, he was one of the early faces connected to YBC. To others, he became another name trapped inside a much larger conflict where music, retaliation claims, social media, and real court charges all started crossing into the same investigation. This case is not just about one murder on one block. It is about how Jae100's death became part of a wider Philadelphia case involving YBC, CCK, PSK, Parrish Street, and a long list of shootings prosecutors say were connected through people, places, evidence, and digital footprints. This is the opening Philadelphia case file on Top Trend Report, TV.com, and the full breakdown is free right now in the Philly section. We put together the murder report, indictment timeline, location map, evidence matrix, online discussion, and reconstructed crime scene visuals so you can understand the case from every angle, not just the headline. The beginning of YBC, before the indictment, before the arrest, before the name Jae100 was attached to a homicide file. YBC was connected to a music movement in West Philadelphia. Young bag chasers carried the idea of money, fame, and a possible way out. At first, the name was tied to music, ambition, and young rappers trying to build something before the violence became the center of the story. Jae100 stood out because he was not just around the movement. Public reporting has described him as one of the early YBC names, somebody people saw as talented enough to help push the group into a bigger lane. He represented a version of YBC that still looked like studio sessions, neighborhood bonds, and a real chance to make noise through music instead of court documents. But the deeper the conflict went, the harder it became to separate the songs from the losses. The same music that gave people visibility also became tied to disses, grief, threats, and street arguments. Online attention started feeding real-life tension, and every shooting or death could turn into a lyric, a post, a rumor, or a scoreboard debate. The murder on Parrish Street. On December 5th, 2022, Philadelphia police responded to the 4300 block of Parrish Street at around 9:20 p.m. When officers arrived, they found Tahjae Brooks lying in the street with several gunshot wounds. He was transported to Penn Presbyterian Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead. He was 21 years old. Years after the murder, public reporting named Ronnie Vincent Quan, Herman Steigel, and Anthony Lacey Woodson, also known as Pistol P, as charged in connection with the killing of Tahjae Brooks. In the case file, those names are handled exactly the way they should be handled. Charged in connection, allegations pending court outcome, not labeled as convicted unless the court says so. That wording matters because this case has a loud street version and an official court version. Online, people may already have their own timeline. Reddit may have its own arguments. Comment sections may already be calling certain names: guilty, innocent, protected, or involved. But a case file has to stay cleaner than that. It has to show what prosecutors allege, what police confirmed, and where the public information stops. That is why the suspect connection board in the full file puts Jae100 in the center and connects the charged names around him without calling anyone a killer. The bigger Philadelphia indictment, Jae100's murder, becomes even more important when you place it inside the larger indictment. Prosecutors said the broader case involved YBC, CCK, PSK, and associated individuals tied to a shooting pattern that stretched from September to 2022 through May 2024. According to the DA's office, The violence connected to the investigation involved 5 homicides and 35 total shooting victims. That scale changes everything. This was not just one Parrish Street murder being mentioned years later. This was one homicide sitting inside a timeline of shootings across Philadelphia with multiple group names, multiple victims, repeated locations, and a larger investigation built over time. The timeline starts before Jae100's murder, September 21st, 2022, shots fired on North 75th Street. September 22nd, a double non-fatal shooting on North 13th Street. October 7th, shots fired on Wallace Street. October 29th, a triple non-fatal shooting on Aspen Street. November 30th, another shooting incident on Reno Street. Then December 5th, 2022, Jae100 is killed on Parrish Street. After his murder, the timeline keeps moving. Kamir Scott is killed on North Preston Street. Jefferson Street appears again and again, including a triple non-fatal shooting, a shots fired incident, the homicide of Sharif King, and another non-fatal shooting. Zaire Stafford is killed near 29th and Clearfield. Kadir Cheeks is killed on Baltimore Avenue. When you lay it out visually, the case stops looking like one disconnected homicide and starts looking like the pattern prosecutors were trying to show. The map that explains the case. One of the strongest parts of the full case file is the location map breakdown. Parrish Street is where Jae100 was killed. North Preston Street is tied to Kamir Scott's homicide. Jefferson Street becomes one of the repeated pressure points in the timeline. Clearfield Street is tied to Zaire Stafford. Baltimore Avenue is tied to Kadir Cheeks. The map matters because the incidents were not all locked to one corner. The public timeline spreads across different parts of Philadelphia, touching West Philadelphia, South Philadelphia, Southwest Philadelphia, and other areas connected through group names, charged individuals, alleged retaliation patterns, and evidence categories prosecutors say help build the case. When people hear 5 homicides and 35 shooting victims, the numbers already sound heavy, but the map makes the case easier to understand. It shows how one murder location became part of a larger web. It shows why investigators were not only looking at one block, one night, or one victim. They were looking at movement across the city. The evidence matrix. The DA's office pointed to several evidence categories in the broader investigation: ballistics, surveillance, digital footprints, grand jury work. Those categories became one of the key parts of the case file because they explain how a case like this gets built. Ballistics can compare fire cartridge casings from separate scenes and look for possible connections between weapons. Surveillance can come from businesses, homes, city cameras, and police vehicle footage. Digital footprints can include online behavior, device-related trails, social media activity, and the way people communicate or perform after violence happens. The grand jury process is where investigators can bring incidents, suspects, and timelines into one larger structure. A case like this usually is not built from one single piece of evidence. It is built by stacking details. A shooting here, a camera angle there, a casing comparison, a phone trail, a post, a lyric, a witness. A connection that may look small by itself but becomes more important when it fits into a larger pattern. Official facts versus online discussion. The online side of this case is loud. Reddit users debated whether YBC ever got back for Jae100. They argued over retaliation timelines, who was really involved, whether certain shootings counted if nobody was hit, and whether people were rewriting the order of events to fit a scoreboard narrative. That online conversation is part of the story, but it is not the same thing as evidence. In the case file, Reddit and street discussion are treated as context, not proof. If people online make a claim, it does not become fact unless it lines up with police records, court documents, prosecutors, or reliable reporting. Still, the online side matters because it shows how the case lived outside the courtroom.